Okay, everybody, we got notes for 2.5, and these are called literal equations. We're going to do a couple of equations, just kind of get you guys in kind of a swing of things, but we're not going to do them all, okay? I'm going to probably put them up so you can see them and talk a little bit about them, but there's just a couple that we'll use, all right? So if you could go ahead and write literal equation, and if you could go ahead and then we'll look at the definition for it. Okay. And when you're done, if you could do formula, and if you could go ahead and write that definition also. Okay. Once again, guys, I'm going to go kind of quick, so if you get kind of behind, make sure that you pause the video, write down your notes that you're kind of getting behind on, and then hit play, okay? All right, so both of these little equations and formulas, they're basically the same, saying the same thing. Two or more variables and then a relationship among quantities, that's kind of saying the same thing, all right? So formulas that we do have that you guys will use in some of the math you got is the perimeter of a rectangle. And, perimeter is adding up all the sides of a figure, whatever that figure might be. Rectangle is kind of unique in that you'll always have two sides that are, or it's four sides. Two sides will be equal, and the other two sides will be equal. The sides are typically called the length and the width. Okay. So for the perimeter, I'm going to have two lengths are the same, two widths are the same. So I can use a special formula. Instead of going length plus width plus width. That's typically what you'd have to do with perimeter of any figure, okay? Another one is the area of a rectangle, okay? So area equals the length times the width. So remember that you need to multiply these together, okay? That's what that's saying, all right? The next one we have is the area of a circle. Okay, area equals pi r squared. R is the radius. The radius of a circle. So if you can draw yourself a circle, a radius starts from the middle of the circle out to any edge point. A circle is really made up of a bunch of points. Okay, and then we're able to enclose it. So a radius is just from the center out to any point on the edge. So if you think about it, I could draw a bunch of radiuses. They all need to be the same length. Pi is a relationship between the radius and the circumference of a circle, and we use 3.14 as kind of an equivalence for pi. Okay. All right, the circumference of a circle is really like the perimeter of a circle. Okay, you might want to write that down. This is a fancy word for perimeter of a circle. Okay, this one, C stands for circumference, 2 pi r. So circumference is just this, going around it. You're going to need a radius again, okay? So there. All right, now I want to point out something here. You have another thing called a diameter. A diameter goes through the center of the circle, but touches the circle on different sides. So that's a diameter, okay? But the diameter is really made up of two radiuses, okay? Now, when I was in school, we learned that this formula was really the circumference is the diameter times pi, okay? That's how I learned it 1,000 years ago. And somewhere along the line, it got changed to getting two radiuses times pi. Okay, two radiuses times pi. Well, two radiuses is one diameter. And I use diameter times pi because that's how I learned it a long time ago. You could use what I learned, or you could use what's being taught now. It's not a big deal. You should get the same answer. Okay. Once again, pi is 3.14. Okay. The area of a triangle, which is another one that we'll use a lot, the area of a triangle is half of the base times the height. Now, there's a couple things we really got to make sure we understand, okay? when you have a triangle and you're trying to get the area, you need a vertical line as the height, okay? The diagonals here that make up the sides of the triangle in that case, they're not vertical. They're really kind of like a diagonal line. A vertical line needs to be shown as 90 degrees. So you'll sometimes see a line drawn inside of it with that right angle symbol. That's that little box that's there. That shows that that's vertical. That becomes your height, okay? All right. The base is always typically what the triangle sits on. So it's the bottom of the triangle, right? Now, that's this formula here. A lot of kids get kind of, you know, creepy because there's a fraction in there. Oh my gosh, I can't do this. And I get that. So there's another way you can rewrite that I think is a little bit more user-friendly for most of us. I can rewrite this as the base times the height and then divided by 2. So I can get the base, I can get the height, I multiply them together, whatever it is, and I then divide it by 2 and I have my answer. It's doing the same thing. Because a lot of times you might get a decimal and you might get it right here. If you were plugging it in here, you might get a decimal right there, and then that just kind of makes some other kids uneasy. I think this is way more user-friendly, okay? I don't care which one you use. I'm just suggesting that's an easier one to do, okay? Another formula that we use is distance, okay? It's a pretty, standard one you use, in a lot of different things. D is distance, okay? R is the rate or the speed that you're going, and T stands for the amount of time it takes you that you're doing whatever you're doing. So a typical one would be driving a car. My distance is going to be calculated by multiplying the speed that I'm going. So let's say, 65 miles per hour is what you can do on a highway most of the time, times the time I'm driving. So maybe let's say I'm going to drive for 2 hours. I can get my distance by going 65 miles per hour for 2 hours, and that will get me, I'm going to cover a distance of 130 miles, okay? Now, what happens is that you can use this formula to find all 3 of these variables. I could give you the distance and say you drove for 4 hours. How fast were you going? Well, that means I'm going to solve for R, okay? I could say you drove a certain distance at a certain speed, and how much time did it take you? Well, now I'm solving it for T. So it's just like substituting stuff in where it needs to go, okay? I'm not going to cover the temperature one because that's typically a science thing. We're not really using it too much in math. It's just a formula to use, but I think it'd be more beneficial for you if we kind of skipped it and you get it in a science class like biology or chemistry, maybe physics, okay? So we'll skip that. So there's a bunch of formulas, just having them, make sure we know how to use them, okay? All right, so we're gonna go here. We're actually gonna, if you wanna read this, you have a budget of $80 to spend, and we're gonna buy pizza and sandwiches. This special pizza place makes pizzas for 10 bucks and makes sandwiches for 5. And then they give us an equation to figure out how many of certain pizzas I can buy or sandwiches I can buy, or a combination of them, okay? So they give us this formula. They tell me that X equals pizzas. And if you write down the equation, please, and Y equals sandwiches, okay? And then I'm going to use that to kind of help me figure out what I can buy of each thing, okay? So down here at the bottom, it says, how many sandwiches, sandwiches can I buy if I buy 3 pizzas? Well, pizzas is X, so I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. And I'm going to solve this now for Y. I still have $80 to spend. Pizzas are 10 bucks, sandwiches are 5. I'm buying 3 pizzas. How many sandwiches can I get? Well, I'm going to go ahead. 10 times 3 is 30. I'm going to get that, and now I'm solving it for Y. So, you've been doing this stuff. So I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides to get 5Y equals I'm sorry, that's an 80. I was doing 50 in my head already. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 5. And y equals 10. Well, y stood for sandwiches. So that tells me I can get 10 sandwiches when I buy 3 pizzas. Okay? So what I'd like you to do now, the next question is, how many sandwiches can I buy if I buy 6 pizzas? Okay? So I'm going to go back to my formula. X was pizzas, so now I'm going to put a 6 in for pizzas. Sandwiches are still $5. That's still what I'm trying to find. I still have $80 I can spend. Okay? So I'm going to let you guys go ahead. I set the question up for you. I'm going to let you solve it, and we'll see how you do. Okay, so now I can buy 4 sandwiches when I buy 6 pizzas. Okay. All right, so we're going to go here to where you have cupcakes and cookies. I got $30 to spend, and I can buy a little bit of combination of both. All right. They're telling me that X represents cookies and Y represents cupcakes. Okay, so now everybody's getting hungry because we're buying pizzas and sandwiches and then cookies and cupcakes. Okay, so they want to know how many cookies can I buy when I buy cupcakes, and I've got 2 different versions. So kind of similar, same problem, right? So since I've done this for you once, I'm going to let you guys do this. I'm substituting now for Y though. Remember what we kind of defined as the variables, all right? So go ahead and do these 2. You hit pause, do the problems, and then hit play when you're done and come back and we'll go over these with you, okay? Okay, so there you go. First time I bought 4 cupcakes, and that will let me get now 9 cookies. And then the second time I bought 6 cupcakes, and this will then let me buy 6 cookies. Okay, so you have an equation here. It's got different variables in it. That's called a literal equation. That was from our notes. And, plugging different things in, I get different things out. And, the math really isn't that tough. You just got to know how to plug things in, where to plug them in, and solve it, not make any mistakes. Okay. Okay. This is being able to write an equation in terms of one of the variables. Okay, so all these have different variables in it. All right. So in this question, if you guys could write these 2 down here, okay, and in both of them I want to get X by itself. I can't really get like an answer because I've got different variables in it, and I can't get an answer, but I can isolate a particular variable. Okay, now what happens is kids really get really uptight when they get these kinds of questions because I'm not really getting an answer, but you just got to think, I got to move stuff around. And I know how to move stuff around. I can add and subtract, multiply and divide, and get things to one side of the equal sign and keep something else on the other. You've been doing that. We just did it. Okay, and the cupcakes and cookies and the pizzas and sandwiches, you just did that. You're doing the same thing and you use certain rules. I got to get this X by itself. Now, I need you to understand, this says X times A minus B. or the quantity a minus b. So that parentheses is really representing some number times x. Well, if I got to get x by itself, that means I got to move this a minus b to this side. How do you do that? Well, remember, I'm multiplying that. Remember, like, I'd have to distribute that technically. Well, that's because I had distribution is multiplication. How do you undo multiplication? Well, I divide. Well, what do you divide by? Well, I divide by that whole thing. Really? Well, sure. Math says I can. Doesn't say what it has to look like or what it's always going to be, but I can divide. And undo multiplication, but I've got to do it to both sides of the equation. And you guys have done that. Okay. So I'm going to go, and this is a tough question to start this off with. Okay. So just hopefully you're following me and writing this down. I can get that all goes away. I'm left with x. Now over here, I can't divide that. I don't even know what C and A and B are. So there's no way I can know what it is, but I can show that C is being divided by A minus B. And that's, guys, that's my answer. What do I do with that? I don't know. If I have some values for those, then I can get something. But right now, all I did was what I was asked to do. Get x by itself. Okay? All right, we good? Okay, so we're going to come over to this problem here. And, you know, I got to get x by itself. And this is probably more of like a question you're used to. If I got to get x by itself, then I got to take care of this -5. Okay, so I'm going to add 5 to both sides. All right, and you know, y plus 5 is y plus 5. That goes away. You're left with 3x. Okay, now this says 3 times x. How do you get x by itself? I divide both sides by 3. Okay, those go away. You're left with x. Well, what is y plus 5 divided by 3? I can't tell you because I don't know what y is. So I just kind of leave it that way. That's as far as I can go. Okay? And we like to flip this around, so I'll flip it around. Okay? Don't make it harder. I know it's difficult to understand because I got these letters and those numbers. I don't really get an answer. But you did what you're supposed to do to solve for x. Okay? Okay. So what I'm going to have you do is write this one down. This one's exactly like the one we just did. Okay, so I'm going to have you try and get that one. You're solving for x again. Go ahead and do that. You can hit pause and then come back and hit play. So the first thing I'll do is I'll subtract 4 from both sides because I'm trying to get x by itself. I get y minus 4. These go away, and I'm left with -2x. Okay? So now to get x by itself, I have to go ahead and divide by what's in front of it. It's a -2. Okay? They go away, so that's going to actually make a positive x because it's a negative divided by a negative. And I'm going to get over here y minus 4, and that's over -2. Can't go any further. I'm basically done. Okay, the only thing I will say, when this negative sign's at the bottom, it just makes the whole thing negative. Okay, so I flipped it around so x is on the left, and I just moved the negative sign because it's making the whole thing negative. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and do these two. What I like to do is draw a circle. So it's asking what's the radius of a circle when the circumference is 64, and they tell us for some reason to use 3.14 for pi. If we go back to our notes, the circumference of a circle was this. Okay? In this question, they're asking me what is the radius, so I have to solve it for this. They tell me the circumference is 64. Okay? So this perimeter of the circle is 64. So I'm going to put it in for C. Okay. 2 is part of the formula. Pi, now they tell me to change it to 3.14. And they want me to get the radius, so they didn't give it to me. I have to find it. Okay. So there you go. All right. So what I'm going to do here is that we're going to multiply 2 times 3.14. And that gets me 6.28 R, because this is all being multiplied together, okay? So now I can go ahead and divide both sides by 6.28. Those go away, and I get R equals about 10.2. And I rounded it to the nearest 10. That's what they asked me to do. Okay. All right. That's a really good question. You know, this is the type of thing that we are really hoping that we can really get good at. It's algebra, plugging stuff in, solving it using our math. It can be hard at the beginning, but hopefully we practice it enough and we can get good at it. Okay. This next question, what's the length of a rectangle with an area? So really important that I kind of know what I'm talking about or what they're telling me, and I can understand how to set stuff up. With an area of 30 square feet and a width of 6. Okay, so that's really important. The other thing that's the most important thing is area. That kind of clues me into what I have to use. If I go back to my notes and I look up the area of a rectangle, it told me this. Area equals the length times the width, okay? So I got 3 different variables here. I'm gonna go look and see what did they give me. So reading it, what is the length? That tells me that's what I gotta find. They give me an area. Area is 30. I already know I gotta find the length, and it's the length times the width, and they give me the width as being 6. So that's called substitution. I get stuff, I substitute it for things that they stand for. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead, you know, solving it for L. I got it solved for L. Remember, this is multiplication. So to undo the multiplication, I'm going to divide by what's with the variable. Divide it by 6, it goes away. You're left with L. 30 divided by 6. Okay, I'll just flop it around so that we're doing it how it usually is done. Okay, so please don't, first off, use your notes. Don't get discombobulated. Take your time, read it carefully, know what they give you, and understand what they want you to find. These are really not that tough. Okay, but it just takes some practice, so we got to keep doing. All right, okay, so that ends 2.5. Once again, if you got any questions, please make sure you get a hold of me so I can help you out, and you know, really work on the homework. This is a pretty important homework assignment that goes with this. Okay.